Firstpost exclusive to begin with. Our colleague Palki Sharma spoke to Brazilian President Lula on the sidelines of the G20 summit. Now, he hailed the Delhi declaration while maintaining that the G20 summit is not the right forum to discuss the Ukraine war. Take a look.
I think it was an extraordinary, the India agenda that they developed, and the promotion of 60 debates or more in different cities. In Brazil, many ministers came to these meetings. We had the health minister, we had the mines and energy minister from Brazil, we had the science and technology minister, the enormous amount, the labor minister came here, and the finance minister came to these meetings. So these hundreds of meetings that you involving thousands of people is a new way that India is teaching to us that it's not sufficient for the presidents of the countries to participate. It's necessary for us to involve the government as a whole, and that we should involve the people that should participate in the debate. We learned a lot, and since we're going to host next year the G20 in Brazil, we will take from India many teachings, and so that we can have a G20 meeting as productive as we had here in India.
One of the big headlines today is the Delhi Declaration. We understand that there is finally consensus. We've seen the draft of the declaration and all leaders have agreed. There was a fear that the war in Ukraine might hijack the agenda. And in the statements that followed since, it was said that Brazil, South Africa and Indonesia helped forge consensus. Can you tell us a little more about the conversation that went in and how did Brazil contribute?
Well, the G20 is a forum that was built because of the 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis. From there onwards, the G20 started to discuss many economic issues, and the Bretton Woods institutions were also started to be discussed, the World Bank, the IMF, in an attempt to try to improve the functioning of these multilateral institute. That's why we didn't want here in India, we would discuss the war between Ukraine and Russia. This is not the appropriate forum for that. On the 19th of September of this month, we will have the General Assembly of the UN, and that's the place for us to discuss the war. That's the place for us to try to discuss peace. That's the place for us to call Putin and Zelensky in a negotiation table, and because no one wants war. Everybody is against war. We want peace. So it's necessary for us to establish a conversation policy so that we can try to convince the two presidents for Russia and Ukraine that the war is not the solution for anything, and that the dialogue, the diplomacy, and a table of dialogue could help much more. From the beginning, Brazil has been saying that we do not want to participate in the war efforts. Brazil wants to participate in the peace effort. We want to try to negotiate, as also India thinks like that, China thinks like that. Many other countries think like Brazil, and so that's why we believe that it's very important so that the war issue should not be included in the document, in the declaration from the G20. That's very important. Otherwise, people go to war and then we lose and waste time instead of discussing the problems that involve 9 billion inhabitants, the hunger that is affecting 735 million people, unemployment of millions of people, and we stay here discussing something that is not our top priority. And so I believe that it was very important, the decision that was made not to allow that the war would come into our declaration.
We saw an expansion of the BRICS. There was a report, or many reports, that said that China wants to create an anti-Western bloc. That's the direction that it was taking. I understand that some countries were not on board with that idea. You endorsed the idea of a BRICS common currency to take on or to replace the US dollar. Are you happy with the direction that this grouping is taking?
Well, first of all, I did not endorse of a common currency. Brazil proposed the idea for a long time for a need of the countries to build a currency so that they don't need the dollar. I can negotiate with India with my own currency and India with their currency. The same thing, my currency with the China's their own currency. The Europeans created the euro. Why can't we create a new currency for trade? But we'll keep our own national currencies. What we did was to allow that the finance ministers of the BRICS countries have 1 year to find a solution for this new currency. And we do not want to confront anybody with this idea. We don't want to go against the G7, because I'm also a guest at the G7. I participate in the G20, in the BRICS meetings. I participate in the IPSA, which is a group, India, Brazil, and South Africa forum, that China does not participate in the IPSA. And so we have to have the awareness that no one wants to create a bloc against another bloc. What we want is to be treated with respect and under equal terms. This is what we want, only that. And India has the right to be not only a big country in terms of population, but a great country in terms of the quality of lives of their people, of its people. Brazil, too, has that right. China, too. The U.S., too. All of us dream that our people will reach the welfare state that Europe has achieved. We dream with the welfare state. And we know for that, this is a very difficult task to reach that welfare state, because we have to find more ores, more richness in nature. And I don't know if nature has all that wealth for us to find. We cannot live in a world, possibly, where 2% of humanity has much more wealth than 50% of the poor.
Well, that's the president of Brazil, which is set to take over the G20 or G21 presidency next from India. But let us get you some of the key highlights.